The parking lot of Henderson's grocery store buzzed with ordinary Saturday afternoon chaos. Shopping carts rattled across asphalt. Children whined for ice cream. The sun hung heavy and indifferent over Riverside. Then everything stopped. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands on the vehicle." Officer Derek Caldwell's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. His hand rested on his service weapon. His jaw set in that particular way that meant compliance wasn't optional. Nia Coleman froze with a bag of apples halfway to her trunk. "Excuse me?" Her voice carried confusion, not defiance. "Is there a problem?" "Put your hands on the vehicle now." Caldwell moved closer. The afternoon light caught his badge. Everything about his posture screamed authority challenged. "I don't understand. Nia's words tangled in her throat. Her other hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, wearing a lavender maternity dress, standing beside her own car with groceries she'd just purchased. "Don't move." Caldwell's voice escalated. Several shoppers turned to watch. Phones emerged from pockets like witnesses summoned by instinct. Nia's receipt fluttered in her hand. "Officer, I have my receipt right here. I paid for everything." "You can check." He grabbed her wrist. The receipt fell. The bag of apples tumbled and scattered across the pavement like evidence of something breaking. His other hand forced her toward the police cruiser. The metal burned hot against her palms. "You're resisting arrest." His breath touched her ear. The handcuffs emerged with a metallic whisper. "I'm pregnant," Nia's voice cracked. "Please, my baby." The crowd watched in horrified silence. 30 people with 30 phones raised. Not one person stepped forward. The clicking of cameras provided the only soundtrack to Nia's humiliation. The handcuffs closed around her wrists with terrible finality. Nia Coleman taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary. Her classroom walls displayed student artwork in careful rows. She color-coded lesson plans and kept emergency granola bars in her desk for kids who came to school hungry. Her students called her Miss Nia and fought to hold her hand during fire drills. She'd lived in Riverside for 8 years now, long enough to know which coffee shop made decent lattes, short enough to still notice the subtle stiffening when she entered certain spaces. The town prided itself on diversity initiatives and inclusive community events. Everyone smiled. Few people looked too closely at what those smiles concealed. Her apartment sat in the newer development on Miller Street. She and Marcus had moved there 3 years ago after their wedding. They'd chosen Riverside deliberately. Good schools, low crime statistics. The kind of place where you raised children and built futures. The kind of place that felt safe. Marcus worked as a software engineer at a firm downtown. He left before dawn and returned after dark. They'd painted the nursery dusty rose last month. Nia had spent hours researching non-toxic paints and optimal crib placement. She made lists for everything: baby registry items, maternity leave logistics, pediatrician interviews. Every Saturday she shopped at Henderson's, same store, same familiar faces at the checkout. The manager knew her by name. She always bought organic apples, and that particular brand of whole wheat bread Marcus preferred. Routine mattered to Nia. Control mattered. In a world that often felt precarious, she built stability through careful structure. Her grandmother's voice lived in her head. "Keep your receipts, baby. Always keep your receipts." 3 generations of black women teaching survival through documentation. Nia kept every receipt in her purse. She kept her registration current. She signaled lane changes with excessive caution. She spoke clearly and made eye contact and never gave anyone a reason. The pregnancy had been planned and wanted and celebrated. She'd announced it at school during morning announcements. The faculty threw her a shower with vanilla cupcakes and tiny onesies. Her students drew pictures of babies that looked like potatoes with faces. She hung them in the nursery. Everything was on track. Everything followed the plan, until Officer Derek Caldwell appeared in Henderson's parking lot and decided her existence required investigation. 20 minutes before the handcuffs. Nia had been comparing apple prices, She'd grabbed a cart with one wobbly wheel that veered persistently left. Standard Saturday shopping, milk, bread, the ingredients for Marcus's favorite lasagna. She moved through familiar aisles with practiced efficiency. Her swollen feet ached in the flats she'd worn because heels were no longer an option. At checkout, the cashier was new, a teenage boy with acne and nervous hands. He rang up her items slowly, methodically. The register beeped its approval. Total, $87.43. Nia inserted her card. The machine processed. The receipt printed. "Have a good day, ma'am." The boy handed her the thin paper. She folded it carefully and tucked it in her purse. "Always keep your receipts." Outside, the heat hit like a wall. She loaded bags into her trunk with careful movements. The baby kicked against her ribs, a reminder of the life growing inside her, a promise of the future they were building. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind. "Official." Cold, Nia turned. Officer Derek Caldwell stood 3 feet away. 30s, buzz cut. The kind of rigid posture that suggested military background. His hand already resting on his belt. Not casually, deliberately. "Can I help you?" Nia smiled. The automatic smile of someone who'd learned to make herself smaller in uncomfortable situations. Store manager reported a possible shoplifting incident. "I need to see your receipt." His eyes never met hers. They scanned her car, her bags, her body. Of course. Nia reached for her purse. She moved slowly, carefully. Her grandmother's voice never makes sudden movements. "I just checked out. Everything's paid for." She retrieved the receipt and extended it. Her hand didn't shake. "Not yet." Caldwell took it, studied it. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "This doesn't match what I was told." "I don't understand." Nia kept her voice level. "What were you told?" "Step away from the vehicle." He handed the receipt back. His hand moved to his weapon, not drawing it, just touching it. A promise, a threat. "Officer, I showed you my receipt. I paid for everything." "There's clearly been a mistake." "Step away from the vehicle now." His voice rose. People in the parking lot turned to stare. Phones emerged. The modern reflex. Document everything. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm 6 months pregnant. I'm just trying to—" "Are you refusing to comply?" Caldwell moved closer. The space between them evaporated. His breath smelled like coffee and contempt. "No, I'm not refusing anything. I'm confused why—" His hand clamped around her wrist. The pain shot up her arm. She gasped. Tried to pull away. The instinct to protect herself overrode training. Overrode caution. "You're resisting arrest." His other hand grabbed her shoulder, forced her toward his cruiser. Her pregnant belly pressed against hot metal. The baby kicked frantically. "I'm pregnant!" The words tore from her throat. "Please." The handcuffs clicked shut. The crowd watched in silence. 30 witnesses, 30 phones recording. Not one person said stop. Not one person stepped between her and violence. The metallic taste of fear filled Nia's mouth. Her receipt lay crumpled on the asphalt. Evidence of innocence discarded and ignored. The holding cell smelled like industrial cleaner and human desperation. Nia sat on the metal bench with her hands folded in her lap. The handcuffs had left red marks on her wrists. She traced them with her thumb. Physical proof that this was real. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. That particular frequency that burrowed into your skull and nested there. She'd been here for 2 hours. No phone call yet. No explanation. Just questions she'd answered over and over in that small room with the 2-way mirror. Did you shoplift? No. Did you resist arrest? No. Were you behaving suspiciously? No. The questions repeated like a skipping record. Her answers never changed. Neither did the expressions on their faces. Her baby kicked, a flutter against her ribs. Nia pressed her palm to her belly and whispered apologies into the sterile air. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For what? For existing? For shopping while black and pregnant? For believing receipts and compliance would be enough? She replayed every moment, every word, every gesture, searching for the thing she'd done wrong, the mistake that justified this. She'd smiled, spoken clearly, shown her receipt, followed every rule her grandmother had taught her. It hadn't mattered, the walls pressed in, concrete and indifference. She thought about Marcus. He'd be worried by now. She should have been home an hour ago. Was he calling the hospital? Driving around searching? Did he know his wife sat in a cell for the crime of buying groceries? Nia closed her eyes. Behind her lids she saw the crowd. All those faces, all those phones, all that silence. She'd felt their gaze like physical weight. Judgment or sympathy she couldn't tell. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe just the passive observation of people grateful it wasn't them. The baby kicked again. Harder this time. Nia's hand curved protectively around her belly. This is the world you're coming into, she thought. A world where your mother's body isn't safe in a grocery store parking lot. Where compliance doesn't guarantee protection. Where receipts mean nothing when someone decides your existence is suspicious. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. They were probably watching through cameras. She wouldn't give them her tears too. Nia's grandmother had raised her after her mother disappeared into addiction's embrace. 3 generations in a small apartment in Baltimore. Her grandmother worked 2 jobs, but always came home to cook dinner. Always checked homework. Always taught lessons that extended beyond textbooks. Keep your head up but your voice down. Her grandmother's hands would move through Nia's hair, braiding carefully. Speak clearly. Enunciate. Don't give them ammunition. The lessons came wrapped in love but tasted like survival strategies. Because that's what they were. When Nia was 12, her grandmother was pulled over for a broken tail light. The stop lasted 45 minutes. Nia watched from the passenger seat as her grandmother answered questions with endless patience. Hands visible on the steering wheel. Yes, sir. No, sir. Of course, sir. The officer wrote a warning and drove away. Her grandmother's hands shook for 20 minutes afterward. Why didn't you tell him the taillight just broke? Nia had asked. Baby, when you're us, explanations sound like excuses. Excuses sound like attitude. Attitude gets you hurt. Her grandmother's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. You're going to have to be twice as good to get half as far. That's not fair. That's just true. Nia had internalized those lessons. She'd graduated valedictorian from her high school, full scholarship to college, master's degree in elementary education. She'd built her life as a fortress of credentials and respectability. Every achievement was armor. Every degree was protection. When she met Marcus at a friend's barbecue, she'd been cautious. He was stable, educated, thoughtful. The kind of man who opened doors and remembered anniversaries. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. She'd said yes in a museum courtyard, while jazz played from hidden speakers. They'd chosen Riverside deliberately. Research and spreadsheets and careful consideration. Low crime. Good schools. Diverse enough to not be the only black family on the block. Safe enough to raise children without constant fear. Or so they'd believed. Marcus worried in ways Nia sometimes found excessive. He triple-checked locks, avoided confrontation, drove 5 miles under the speed limit. Don't make waves, he'd say, when she complained about microaggressions at work. Just focus on what matters. He meant well. He meant survival. But Nia had followed the rules. She'd done everything right. She'd built the armor and wore it daily. In Henderson's parking lot, it had disintegrated like paper in rain. All her careful construction meaningless. All her grandmother's lessons insufficient. The baby was supposed to be their triumph. Proof that they'd made it. Proof that the sacrifices and caution had been worth it. Now Nia sat in a holding cell, and that triumph felt like another vulnerability. Another thing the world could take away. Marcus received the call at 4:47 p.m. The police station. His wife. Arrested. The words didn't connect properly in his brain. He drove to the station with his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. They released Nia after he posted bail. $500. She emerged from the back hallway looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. The lavender dress was wrinkled. Her eyes were hollow. He wrapped her in his arms and felt her tremble. "I did everything right," she whispered against his chest. I showed him the receipt. At home, Marcus made tea she didn't drink. She sat at their kitchen table and recounted every detail. He listened with growing fury. His hands clenched into fists. His jaw ached from grinding his teeth. This was exactly what he'd feared. Exactly why he'd wanted to move to the suburbs. And it happened anyway. "We need a lawyer." Marcus pulled out his phone, started searching. "This is wrongful arrest. False imprisonment. We'll sue the department." "What's the point?" Claire's voice was flat, defeated. "It's my word against his. He'll say I was combative. They always do." "You're not doing this." Marcus knelt beside her chair, took her hands. "You're not giving up." "That's not you." But it wasn't about giving up. It was about knowing how this story usually ended. She'd seen the news. She'd watched the videos. She knew how juries looked at black women who claimed victimization. Too angry, too aggressive, too something. Never quite believable enough. Then Marcus made a phone call to a friend at the ACLU. The friend asked one crucial question. Was the officer wearing a body camera? Marcus checked. Called the station. Spent 20 minutes on hold. Finally got an answer. Yes. Officer Caldwell's body camera had been active during the entire interaction. Department policy mandated recording for all civilian encounters. Something shifted in Nia's chest. A small spark in the darkness. Body cameras didn't lie. Body cameras couldn't be gaslit or doubted or reinterpreted. Body cameras were evidence. The ACLU friend referred them to Stephanie Chen, a civil rights attorney who specialized in police misconduct cases. Stephanie listened to Nia's story over speakerphone. Asked pointed questions. Her tone shifted from sympathetic to strategic. "The body camera footage is crucial," Stephanie said. "We'll request it through discovery. If it shows what you've described, this becomes a very different case." "And if it doesn't show up?" Marcus asked. He'd learned to expect disappointment. "Then we fight harder." Stephanie's voice carried steel. "But in my experience, when they have footage that supports their narrative, they're eager to share it. When it contradicts their story, suddenly there are technical difficulties." Nia felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent. The possibility that truth might matter. That evidence might speak louder than assumptions. That maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The baby kicked. Nia pressed her hand to her belly. She thought about her grandmother's lessons. About armor and survival. About being twice as good for half as far. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start demanding. Demanding justice. Demanding accountability. Demanding that her truth be heard. "I want to fight," she said quietly. Marcus squeezed her hand. Stephanie made a note in her file. And somewhere in a police server, body camera footage waited to tell its story. The preliminary hearing took place in courtroom 4B on a Wednesday morning. Nia wore a royal blue maternity dress and pearl earrings, armor of respectability. Marcus sat directly behind her in the gallery. His presence was an anchor. Judge Raymond Howell presided, 60-something, silver hair, the kind of face that suggested reasonable decisions and measured temperament. Nia searched his expression for clues, found nothing but professional neutrality. Officer Caldwell sat at the defense table with his union representative and attorney. He wore his dress uniform. Polished shoes, perfect posture. He didn't look at Nia once. Not during the entry, not during the proceedings. His jaw remained set in that same rigid line. Stephanie Chen presented the basics. Wrongful arrest, excessive force, violation of civil rights. Her voice carried controlled passion. She painted a picture of a pregnant woman brutalized for the crime of existing. The judge took notes. His pen scratched across paper. Then Caldwell's attorney stood. James Morrison. Expensive suit, silver tongue. He spoke about officer safety and suspicious behavior and split-second decisions. His narrative transformed Nia from victim to threat. Officer Caldwell responded to a legitimate report, Morrison said smoothly. My client followed protocol. When Mrs. Coleman became combative and refused to comply, he had no choice but to effect an arrest. Nia's hands clenched in her lap. Combative. The word landed like a slap. She'd shown her receipt. She'd asked questions. She'd protected her pregnant belly when he grabbed her. Somehow this became combative. The defense contends this is a simple misunderstanding, Morrison continued. A scared officer, an emotional civilian. These situations are regrettable, but hardly constitute misconduct. Judge Howell nodded slowly. Nia's stomach dropped. She could feel the narrative slipping, could feel her truth being rewritten into something more palatable, more convenient. Less damning, Your Honor. Stephanie stood. We've requested the body camera footage through Discovery. That footage will show exactly what transpired. Morrison's expression flickered, just for a moment, barely noticeable. But Nia caught it. Something that looked like concern. The prosecution intends to screen the body camera footage. Judge Howell asked, Yes, Your Honor. We believe it will conclusively demonstrate Officer Caldwell's misconduct. Very well. The judge checked his calendar. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for evidence presentation. I'll expect all relevant materials submitted 48 hours prior. Nia exhaled. 2 weeks felt like forever, but the footage would tell the truth. The footage would vindicate her. She allowed herself a small measure of hope. Outside the courtroom, Stephanie's phone buzzed. She read the message. Her expression darkened. What is it? Marcus asked. The footage. Stephanie looked up. Her eyes carried bad news. The department says there's been a technical issue. They're working to recover it. The next 72 hours became a nightmare of phone calls and legal maneuvering. Stephanie filed emergency motions. The department claimed server corruption. IT specialists were examining the issue. Everything was being done to recover the files. Standard bureaucratic language that meant nothing and everything. Nia couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake feeling her baby kick and wondering if justice was just another myth they sold to maintain compliance. Marcus took time off work. He made calls, sent emails, hit walls everywhere. It's not gone, Stephanie insisted during their conference call. They have backup systems, multiple redundancies. This is deliberate. Can you prove that? Marcus asked. Not without cooperation from inside the department. Stephanie's frustration bled through, and everyone's closing ranks. The preliminary hearing was 8 days away. Without the footage, it became a credibility contest. Pregnant black teacher versus decorated white officer. Nia had studied enough history to know how that story usually ended. She sat in the nursery they'd painted with such hope. The dusty rose walls that were supposed to represent new beginnings. The crib they'd assembled together with Marcus reading instructions in that careful way he did everything. All of it felt hollow now. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But something made her pick up. Mrs. Coleman? Male voice. Young, nervous. Yes? My name is Officer Brandon Hayes. He paused. She heard breathing. Hesitation. I work with Derek Caldwell. I was there that day at Henderson's. Nia's heart stopped. She pressed the phone tighter against her ear. I saw what he did to you. The words came faster now, tumbling out. I saw the whole thing. And it's not the first time. He's got a pattern. The department knows. They protect their own. Do you have the footage? Nia's voice barely functioned. I made a backup. Before it disappeared, I knew they'd try to bury it. He exhaled shakily. I can't do this anymore. I can't watch him destroy people and stay silent. Nia stood. Her legs trembled. Why are you telling me this? Because I have a daughter. His voice cracked. She's 3. I want her to grow up in a world where people do the right thing. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Will you testify? Silence. Long enough that Nia thought he'd hung up. Then, yes, I'll testify. And I'll bring the footage. Nia closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. Not tears of sadness anymore. Something else, something that felt like vindication waiting to be born. Thank you, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me this long. Officer Hayes disconnected. Nia called Stephanie immediately, then Marcus. The words spilled out in a rush. They had the footage. They had a witness. They had a chance. But in the back of her mind a question lingered. How far would the department go to protect one of their own? The backlash started on social media before sunrise. Someone leaked Nia's name. Within hours her Facebook profile was flooded with comments. Her Instagram became a battlefield. Strangers dissected her life with surgical cruelty. She probably was shoplifting. Always playing the victim card. Bet she was mouthing off to the officer. Why is she even pregnant if she's causing trouble? Nia deleted the apps. But the damage seeped through other channels. Parents at school began requesting their children be moved from her class. The principal called her into his office with sympathetic eyes and corporate language about taking time to heal and avoiding distractions. Medical leave, suggested, strongly. Nia cleaned out her classroom on a Friday afternoon. Her students had made cards. Their handwriting was crooked and earnest. We miss you, Miss Nia. She packed them in a box with her name placard and photos. The walls looked bare without her presence. Marcus tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she saw the tightness around his mouth, heard his hushed phone conversations. His mother had called 3 times suggesting they drop the case. Move somewhere new. Start over. You have a baby to think about, she'd said. As if Nia thought about anything else, even neighbors became strangers. The couple in 3B who'd always waved suddenly found their shoes fascinating when passing in the hallway. The mail, carrier who'd congratulated her on the pregnancy, now delivered in silence. Invisibility felt safer than association. Nia sat in the nursery and stared at the dusty rose walls. All that hope, painted in careful strokes. Now it felt like a monument to naivety. She'd believed that doing everything right would be enough. That credentials and respectability would protect her. That America's promises extended to bodies that looked like hers. The baby kicked, a reminder of responsibility, of why retreat wasn't an option. But exhaustion lived in Nia's bones now. The weight of fighting, of being judged, of having her truth questioned by strangers who'd already decided her guilt. Her phone buzzed. Text from Stephanie. Hayes is solid. We have the footage. Don't give up now. Nia pressed her palm against her belly. Felt the flutter of life. Thought about her grandmother braiding her hair and teaching survival, about Marcus choosing her every single day, about Officer Hayes risking his career for a stranger's justice. Maybe she was fighting for more than herself. Maybe she was fighting so her daughter wouldn't have to learn these same survival lessons, wouldn't have to armor herself against a world determined to see her as threat rather than human. Nia stood, her reflection caught in the nursery window. Pregnant, tired, but still here, still standing. That had to count for something. Officer Brandon Hayes met them in Stephanie's office 3 days before the hearing. He arrived in civilian clothes, jeans and a plain shirt. Without the uniform, he looked younger, more uncertain, but his jaw carried determination. I brought everything. He placed a thumb drive on Stephanie's desk. The full footage from Caldwell's body camera, plus incident reports from 3 other cases that never went anywhere, all involving black women, all following the same pattern. Stephanie inserted the drive into her laptop. The video loaded. Nia steeled herself. Marcus reached for her hand. They watched the parking lot encounter unfold from Caldwell's perspective. There she was. Lavender dress, pregnant belly, loading groceries with careful movements. Caldwell approached. His body language was aggressive from the first step. Predatory. The audio was crystal clear. Every word Nia had spoken, her politeness, her confusion, her receipt extended in trembling fingers. And Caldwell's escalation, deliberate, calculated. When Nia tried to explain, he grabbed her. When she gasped in pain, he called it resistance. The footage showed what the official report had omitted. Caldwell never asked for identification, never verified the store manager's claim, never gave Nia a chance to de-escalate. He decided her guilt before speaking a single word. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. Watching your wife brutalized from the aggressor's viewpoint carried its own violence. Hayes pulled up the other cases. A woman accused of loitering outside her own apartment building. Another questioned for suspicious behavior while birdwatching in a public park. A third arrested for failure to comply when she asked why she was being detained. All black women, all dismissed or settled quietly. "Why now?" Stephanie asked Hayes. "Why come forward now?" "Because I have a daughter." Hayes's voice was quiet, and I realized I was teaching her that silence is acceptable, that career is more important than conscience. I don't want her growing up in a world where men like Caldwell have power and men like me say nothing. Stephanie studied him. "They'll destroy you for this. You know that." "I know," he met her gaze. "But I'll be able to look at my daughter without shame." That's worth something. Nia felt something shift inside her chest. This white officer risking everything because it was right, because silence had become unbearable, because even institutions could crack when individuals chose courage over complicity. "We need to prepare for their counterattack," Stephanie said. She was already building strategy. "They'll claim the footage is edited, that Hayes has an axe to grind, that this is about departmental politics, not justice. Let them claim whatever they want." Nia's voice was steady now, strengthened by evidence, by allies, by the knowledge that she wasn't fighting alone. "The footage doesn't lie. Those other cases don't lie. The pattern is undeniable." Marcus squeezed her hand. Hayes nodded. Stephanie smiled grimly and began drafting motions. Outside the office window, Riverside continued its daily rhythm. People shopping and working and pretending everything was fine. But in this room, 4 people prepared to force a reckoning, to drag truth into daylight, to demand that power answer for its abuses. The hearing was 3 days away. Nia felt ready. Not fearless, but ready. There was a difference. Courtroom 4B filled beyond capacity. People lined the walls. Journalists crowded the press section. Community activists sat shoulder to shoulder with curious civilians. The air hummed with anticipation. Everyone knew something significant was about to unfold. Judge Howell entered. The bailiff called for order. Nia sat at the plaintiff's table with Stephanie. Her royal blue dress had been replaced with something simpler, cream-colored, professional. She'd stopped performing respectability. Now she just existed. Marcus sat in the front row. Officer Hayes sat 3 rows back. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded. She nodded back. Morrison started with his opening statement, polished, persuasive. He painted Caldwell as a dedicated officer navigating impossible situations. He spoke about split-second decisions and the challenges of modern policing. His voice carried practiced sympathy. Then Stephanie stood. She didn't use notes. Didn't need them. "Your Honor, the defense has crafted a compelling narrative. But narratives mean nothing when we have facts. And today we have facts." She held up a remote control. "I'd like to screen the body camera footage from Officer Caldwell's encounter with Mrs. Coleman." Morrison shot to his feet. "Your Honor, we were told that footage was corrupted." "It was recovered," Stephanie said smoothly. "Through alternative channels. Funny how things get found when people actually look." The lights dimmed. The screen descended. Nia's hands gripped the armrests. She'd watched this footage a dozen times in preparation. It never got easier. The video played. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Even breathing seemed to pause. There was Nia in the parking lot, pregnant, vulnerable, loading groceries. There was Caldwell approaching with hostile body language. Every word came through clearly. "Can I help you?" Nia's voice polite, unafraid yet. "I need to see your receipt." Caldwell's tone. Already accusatory, the receipt exchange. Her explanation. His dismissal. His hand moving to his weapon when she was clearly unarmed and 7 months pregnant. The moment he grabbed her wrist. Her gasp of pain. Her plea, "I'm pregnant." His response, "You're resisting arrest." Several people in the gallery gasped audibly. A woman in the back row wiped tears. Judge Howell leaned forward, his expression darkening. The video continued. The handcuffs. The crowd. The phone's recording. Caldwell's face as he forced Nia against the hot metal of his cruiser. No hesitation. No concern for the baby she carried. Just raw exercise of power over someone he deemed suspicious for existing. The screen went black. The lights came up. Silence pressed against the walls. "That," Stephanie said quietly, "is what routine procedure looks like. That is what officer safety justifies. A pregnant woman brutalized in a parking lot for shopping while black." Morrison stood shakily. "Your Honor, out of context?" "What context makes that acceptable?" Judge Howell's voice cut through the courtroom like a gavel strike. His face had gone pale. What possible context justifies that level of force against a visibly pregnant, unarmed woman who showed her receipt? Morrison had no answer. Stephanie wasn't finished. "I'd also like to call Officer Brandon Hayes to the stand." Hayes walked to the witness box with steady steps. He was sworn in. His voice didn't waver as he testified about the pattern, about the other cases, about the department's habit of burying complaints, about his decision to come forward because silence had become intolerable. The courtroom listened with rapt attention. This wasn't just about Nia anymore. This was about systemic failure, about institutions protecting their own regardless of harm caused, about one officer's courage forcing accountability. When Stephanie finished her questioning, Morrison attempted cross-examination. He tried to paint Hayes as disgruntled, as politically motivated, but the footage existed. The other cases existed. No amount of narrative craft could erase evidence. Judge Howell called for a brief recess. When he returned, his expression carried steel. "I've seen enough. Officer Caldwell's actions constitute a clear violation of Mrs. Coleman's civil rights. The use of force was excessive, unwarranted, and based on no legitimate suspicion. This case will proceed to trial, and I'm recommending the department conduct an immediate internal investigation." Nia closed her eyes, felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder, felt the baby kick, felt something that might be vindication beginning to bloom. 3 months later, Nia stood in the hospital room holding her daughter. They'd named her Grace, 7 pounds 3 ounces, born at sunrise with her father's eyes and her mother's determined chin. Officer Derek Caldwell had been terminated. Criminal charges were pending. The department had implemented mandatory bias training and revised its use of force protocols. Empty gestures, perhaps, but Officer Hayes was now leading the reform committee. Change was slow, but it was happening. The civil suit had been settled, a significant sum that Nia and Marcus put into a college fund for Grace, and a public apology. Words on paper couldn't undo harm, but acknowledgement mattered. Official recognition that she'd been wronged mattered. Riverside hadn't transformed overnight. Some neighbors still avoided eye contact. Some parents still whispered. But others reached out, brought casseroles, sent cards, chose solidarity over silence. The community fractured along lines of conscience. Nia's classroom waited for her return. The principal had personally asked her to come back. New parents specifically requested their children be placed in her class. She'd become something she never sought, a symbol, a reminder that speaking truth to power was possible. difficult, costly, but possible. Marcus cradled Grace while Nia recovered. He hummed softly. His fear had transformed into protective tenderness. He'd learned that playing it safe didn't guarantee safety, that sometimes the only path forward was through confrontation. Officer Hayes faced ongoing harassment from colleagues, but he'd also received support from community organizations and civil rights groups. He was building something new from the wreckage of what was. His daughter would grow up knowing her father chose justice over comfort. Nia looked at Grace sleeping in Marcus's arms. This tiny human who would inherit whatever world they built. She thought about her grandmother's lessons, about receipts and compliance and armor, about being twice as good for half as far. Maybe it was time for new lessons. Maybe it was time to teach Grace that being good wasn't enough. That justice required demand, not request. That change happened when ordinary people refused to accept the unacceptable as inevitable. The dusty rose nursery walls no longer felt hollow. They represented possibility now. Real possibility. Not the naive belief that playing by rules guaranteed protection, but the harder truth that speaking up could shift systems. That evidence could overcome narrative. That allies could emerge from unexpected places. Grace stirred, opened her eyes, looked at Nia with that unfocused newborn gaze, and Nia made a silent promise. You will know your worth. You will know your rights. You will know that your voice matters. And you will never apologize for taking up space in a world that is as much yours as anyone's. Outside, Riverside continued its rhythm. But inside this hospital room a new story began. 6 months after Grace's birth, Nia returned to her classroom. The walls still displayed student artwork in careful rows, but now she'd added something new, a poster that read, "Justice requires courage, not just goodness." During her first week back, a student asked the question, the one she'd been expecting. "Miss Nia, is it true you were arrested?" "My mum said you were on the news." The other students stopped their work, waited. The room held its breath. Nia sat on the edge of her desk, thought carefully about her words. These were 8-year-olds, but 8-year-olds deserve truth wrapped in hope. "Yes," she said simply. "Something unfair happened to me. A police officer made a mistake. A serious mistake, and I had to decide whether to stay quiet or speak up." "What did you do?" Another student. Leaning forward, I spoke up. "It was scary. It was hard. But I spoke up, because staying silent wouldn't make things better. It would just make things quieter." "Did it work?" The first student again. Her eyes wide, Nia thought about the footage, about Officer Hayes, about the settlement and the reforms and the long road still ahead, about Grace sleeping in the daycare down the hall, about her grandmother's lessons that were true but insufficient, about building something new from the wreckage of what was. "It's still working," she said. "Change doesn't happen all at once. It happens when people decide that enough is enough, when good people stop being quiet, when allies step forward even when it's hard." She placed her hand over her heart, felt it beating steady and strong, thought about that day in the parking lot, about handcuffs and humiliation, and the moment she almost gave up, about choosing to fight anyway. "The world isn't always fair," Nia continued, "but that doesn't mean we accept unfairness. It means we work to make it better. One truth at a time, one voice at a time, one person choosing courage over comfort." The students nodded, absorbing, processing, carrying these lessons into whatever future awaited them. After school, Nia walked to her car through Henderson's parking lot. The same lot, the same store, but she walked differently now. Not smaller, not apologetic, just present, just human, just enough. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "Grace said Mama today." Nia smiled, started her car, drove home through streets that would never be perfect, but could be better. To a daughter who would learn new lessons. To a future that demanded courage but offered possibility. The sun hung low over Riverside, indifferent and golden, illuminating everything equally. and Nia drove through its light unafraid.